at 7 PM in the Londonderry Town offices. I ask you to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Representative Baldessaro.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Tonight's meeting is to discuss what action the board will take regarding security warrant. I know Representative Baldessaro has an announcement he'd like to make, so if you want to come up and we'll get that going, and then we'll head on to business of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's an honor to come here to the school board. Actually, the reason I came here this evening, of course, I've heard a lot of news throughout, and people contacting me why I didn't come to the school board and speak on behalf of the security. So I decided here that I would come here tonight and speak on behalf of it. And if you don't mind, I'll take a couple of minutes and go forward. First of all, I wanted to read something to you, which maybe many aren't aware. I've told some people on the phone here under the New Hampshire Constitution that a society, this is our part first, its organization and purpose. When men enter into a state of society, they surrender up some of their natural rights to that society in order to ensure the protections of others. And without such an equivalent, the surrender is void. So I compliment you by our Constitution, New Hampshire, because people have to surrender up certain rights to protect themselves, and you want to protect the schools, you know, and take that extra step. I've been in 2 shootings as a civilian. I've probably been, probably more experienced than many of your police here in Londonderry. In a family restaurant, when people come in, chased somebody in the restaurant and shot one of our patrons there, and then, of course, I was faced with a gun pointing at me at the door and holding people down and see people scatter everywhere in every direction, because it's easy to sit here and formulate a plan in your mind, and really when something happens, a million and one things go through your mind on how to protect others and yourself, at the time. So what I'm trying to get at here is sometimes emotions, grow, and they go higher and higher, and we want to do the right thing. And sometimes we end up with feel-good type security decisions that people make. And I know I've seen the same thing at the State House there, which we put a stop to because we have no metal detectors. We have no security with armed at the State House, but yet, we put a stop in one area. You can't carry guns, but yet everyone else can. But certain people feel good. They did the right thing. When we know that, you still left us open. Just today, I had with the state troopers there on a thread on my phone. Somebody wants to kill me. Okay, so these are things that happen, but my emotions are not going to make me make some bad decisions. But what I'm trying to get at here, if you take a look at the police departments throughout the country, it takes anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 10 minutes to act and get to a school or anywhere. The damage is already done. In this new town court, where many people are jumping the gun here on schools and want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to correct the security, we are fortunate here in New Hampshire because we are a safe state. We're fortunate here because our crime is low. We're the safest state in the country for the last 4 years. And the reason why, because when people come into Londonderry, first of all, we got one of the largest gun clubs in the state here, over 850 members. I'm just hoping before we spend all this money, we really think about it. Because I read in your thing here today on the internet too, and I just seen it again, on the cards. My girlfriend who's sitting here with me is an IT specialist and understands and could tell you, because she deals with it, the money and the maintenance and the costs that go along with this to maintain them every time somebody loses a card. Okay, and a reason I'm throwing that out, because the hope that you really take a look before you do some of these measures and look at the end result and the cost that it could cost to the taxpayers. We have some schools, North School and South School, that are out a ways from our police department. We are fortunate to have 4 schools that the police can probably just walk across the street. Well, the 4th one is up the road. So I'm asking you to please, before you spend all this money, do some type of study on this here. and maybe take a look. I know when I was in high school, we had a lot of, during the busing age, they hired security, okay? Some of them were retired cops, and they didn't pay the full the retirement. They didn't do all this here in Cambridge, Mass, because there was knives. People getting knifed in school and fights over the blacks and whites, the racial stuff that was going on. But it fixed the problem, and the cost wasn't, extravagant to the taxpayers. So that's why I'm coming here tonight asking you to please do a study on this here instead of just listening to the police. Naturally, they're the answer to all throughout the state, but they show up after the fact, after the damage is already done. And we're already ahead of the game. Our school doors are secured, but we all know you can't secure every door in the building because you got to push them. They're not locked, I should say. So if we look at the whole picture, please, I'm asking you, before you spend, I don't know, now I hear it's $170,000 versus $400 and something thousand. I was called on the $400 and something thousand. So maybe there might be a different opinion now that is down, but I'm asking you, please, take a look and study this before you jump the gun on some stuff that will cost you a lot more in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
I appreciate your being concerned about the cost on this.
Also the safety.
No, I appreciate the concern on the cost. I am too. I was going to get to the safety. When you spoke, though, I made some notes, and I just had a question. Do you think that we should, because of what you had said on the State House and the amount of time it takes police to get to the schools, do you think that we should have employees and citizens carrying weapons in the schools?
That's a good question. I really did some good thought on that there. Before you could answer that, I would take a look at the teachers that you have. You probably got veterans that are teachers. You probably have some teachers that already have carried concealed. If you look at the FBI studies that we've been looking at the State House, you will see the states here with the less gun restrictions like we have in New Hampshire, you have less crime. If people don't know who has a gun in the school, they'll think twice. If they know that you have a gun, they'll think twice about entering because you don't know who's carrying. If you take a look at the law, now I'm going to go to the law to answer your question. The federal law basically states the schools are no gun zones. But in New Hampshire law, there's no law.
On that note,
10 years.
yes, we gotta go.
What happened?
What happened? I was wondering how this could get here so real. That wasn't nice. It might have been a little bit.
Fire alarm went off at 3 a.m. You freaking lost your mind. You want to trust your elders?
we all set, Mary?
Yep.
All right, welcome back.
As I was saying,
That was fun.
That commercial was brought to you by the Londonderry Fire Department.
Thank you, like them.
Yes,
yeah,
Mr. Cole was.
and Procter
giving some-
Silex toasters.
Yes.
So food from cooking, no, smoke from cooking.
So, Mr. Cole, we want to make sure that he is off to a home ec course. So he's all set to make toast. All right, so where were we? Steve, you were asking a question of Representative Baldessaro?
Yep, and thank you. Yep, that's all I had.
I was trying to finish also, there was another, the question you asked, and I mentioned about the state of New Hampshire does not actually have a law in place. It's the federal government that has the law about the schools being a no-gun zone. And many of the killings throughout the country are in no-gun zones. But I had a question was, and I think we were talking outside there with John, and do we know how many teachers have a concealed weapon permit now? Because there's more and more women today, and, you know, here in New Hampshire, have got their concealed weapon permits. Do we know?
I've never asked the question now.
Okay. My last in closing there, I'm
Can we
hoping,
actually ask that question? Just, can we actually ask that question?
I don't see why
I have
not.
someone to answer, but you can ask anything you want.
The
No, can't
reason
ask
why,
how old they
because
are.
if people
Ask how old
think,
they are.
That's what I meant.
and they don't know who's carrying, they think twice about entering a building or a home, you know, and that's why it's, you know, before a lot of money. That's why I asked you to study this here. But if you take a look what happened in China, you know, China has no gun laws. I mean, no, they have no guns at all. And if you take a look at the murder rate in China, just a couple days before the Connecticut killing, there was 22 children were killed at a school, and they were by knives. In September of last year, and the reason why I'm involved with a lot of this stuff at the State House, I've done some research on this. Prior to that, at a daycare center with a hatchet, okay, where they injured people. So the bottom line, if with the way the doors are throughout the whole building, if somebody's walking, banging on the door, a natural reaction to a young kid is to open the door, because all you gotta do, even though it's locked, you just push the thing. Even though you tell them 1,000,001 times, you know it's gonna happen. But that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, so move on to deliberation, and, yes, Peter.
Before we go on to the presentation for the night, I got two housekeeping issues,
Okay?
okay?
Unplug the toaster.
Yeah, that was probably,
You're out
that was
the
probably
door.
half an hour ago. Number one was, the board had asked, is there, or what is the procedure if at deliberative session, one or other articles are amended, and the board would like to reconsider its vote? Talk to Attorney Graham. The procedure would be, and what we'll do is, we will post a meeting of the board immediately following the deliberative session if necessary. At that time, the board can go into a regular meeting and discuss any articles it wishes to reconsider and change their vote. If a different vote is taken, obviously it's recorded, and that vote will show up on the ballot. And the Budget Committee has the same provisions, procedure, whatever. Obviously, they could do it immediately following the town meeting on the 4th, and then they could do the same at the, after our meeting.
So Peter, as a scenario, let's say we go into the session and an article is amended to the dissatisfaction of us, that's not what our intention were. We have a meeting, and we voted down because it's now changed.
Right,
That would be the purpose of that.
right. For example.
But it wouldn't vote it down, it would still show up, it would just show that.
Change our
Right,
recommendation.
for example, let's take the operating budget. I believe it was a 7-0 vote for the article as it was proposed. Let's say the deliberative session amends it up. I'm just making up scenarios, $500,000, and the board doesn't feel that that's appropriate. We would have a meeting, you would then take up the discussion. You can't change it, because the deliberative session amended the article, but the board could take a vote of a different act, and that act and vote would show on the ballot,
Yeah, okay.
okay? And same thing with the Budget Committee.
Right.
Clear on that?
Yep.
The other one is,
I'm sorry, one more question. Is there a time limit of, let's say we don't hold the meeting that day, is there a time limit
We're under time constraints, because obviously we have to get the ballot written. The ballots have to, now with new state law, right, have to be counted. So your constraints isn't state, there is no state law that says you have X hours to do this. The constraints are, we need to get the tally and the votes correct, to send it to the printer, for the ballots to be done, to be counted, sealed, and then ready for, so Attorney Graham's recommendation would be immediately following, you just, post the meeting. If there's no change, just close the meeting, adjourn, and go home,
Got it, okay, thank you.
okay?
Your other thing?
The other one is, I sent an email to the board. I received a voicemail from Mrs. Michaels, John Michaels, the moderator's wife. Due to personal reasons, he most likely, and I say will not, I should say will not, be able to attend the school deliberative session. So therefore, he will not be able to fulfill his duty as moderator of the school deliberative meeting. I did get a quick conversation with Attorney Graham, and he's going to write up the procedure for us. The long and short answer is, Ron Campbell, who is the clerk, will open the meeting and entertain names to be the moderator pro tem. The board obviously could make a recommendation, or it could come from the general area. A name is forwarded, it's second, so forth, voted on. If that motion carries, that person becomes a moderator for that night.
At what meeting are we doing that? We
The
put it out on
the
we
deliberative
do that right at
session,
deliberative.
a week from Friday, right.
So, let me get this straight. We didn't have a Plan B?
There is no, Plan B is this.
This
This
is
is state
Plan
law.
B.
This is the procedure.
That's right.
concerning.
No, it's Plan B.
Yeah.
What's the qualification?
The qualification is you have to be at the meeting and a registered voter.
And breathing.
Do you need to know the law?
Nope. What will happen is, if you've been at the meeting, Mr. Michaels has like a, I won't say a preamble, but like a set of instructions. We will have that available. Obviously, to Mary's point, John has always attained Bob Sauer as his assistant for the night. His main duties were to get the clerks and the ballots and all that organized. He's aware that John can't make it. He said he's more than willing to, be the moderator if chosen. So that's one name I'm sure, that we can toss out, so to speak.
We've actually had Bob be the moderator one
He's
year,
been,
but-
he was the assistant, yeah,
Right.
right. And I think he was one when John couldn't make it for a
Right.
reason. So, I will find out if it's appropriate for the board to, when Mr. Campbell makes the announcement, is it appropriate for the board to say, I recommend so-and-so, whatever, I'll find that out. But to your point, it's a registered voter, attending the meeting.
Can I ask another question?
Certainly, may.
Is the attorney for the school district at the deliberative session?
Always.
Makes me feel better.
Why?
Okay, Peter, let's move on to
Tossed out.
deliberation.
Okay, those are the two housekeeping ones. We,
Bless you.
we talked to you last week about security article. We gave you a number of 475. The board had asked us to go back, prioritize, come up with some ideas, different options, so to speak, to make this more easier on the wallet, so to speak, while maintaining security for the students. The first thing, if you remember, that we heard from the experts we talked to when we had our meetings with the police, and certainly you heard it from Chief Hart the other night, was communications is paramount. So if you remember, the cost of the communications, which include some enhancements to cell and landline phones, some new radios, I wouldn't say enhancements, but radios that would have direct access to police dispatch, and panic buttons would be installed in certain areas. And that was a cost of $43,000. And the other piece of the, what we call like 1A, for, so to speak, was supporting the additional SRO in the school buildings. Some of us would argue, and you heard Chief Hart say that given his expertise, he would recommend that there be 3 SROs in the program. But as you know, there is a warrant article on the town side to fund 1 additional SRO at $101,000, and that would bring it to 2 in the district. The second piece would be enhancement to building access. This was, remember, we talked about the installation of a card access system. The doors would be locked before school opens. Staff, teachers, so forth, would have either some kind of a key fob or a card that they would swipe and allow them in the buildings. We would also have a door monitoring or censoring system. We were told by police that if you're going to have the card access system, you're kind of jeopardizing the dollars that you're putting into it if you don't have a monitoring to ensure that if a door isn't supposed to be open, and it isn't open. So that's where the door sensor or monitoring system comes in. Our recommendation is that this work be done over the summer months. This would be our recommendation of the article for the building security, Article 10, and our estimated cost of this piece is $170,000. Our funding recommendations, we were asked to come up with some ideas. You have them before you. We went through 4 scenarios, and I will go through the one that we recommend to the board tonight. The communications piece of $43,000, we will do it inside the FY13 budget. That will be done, if approved by the board, be done immediately, or we'll start the process immediately, and it should be done way before the summer. We would then recommend that Article 10, which is the building security article, be amended to $170,000. We also recommend, as a way of funding this, to keep the tax impact, or additional tax impact, small, would be to reduce Article 6. Article 6 is the small equipment. It's on the warrant at $200,000. We would make a recommendation that someone on the board, when after the article's on the floor, amend this to 100, and then zero out, so to speak, the benefits article. I believe it's at 50. We would zero it out for this year. That leaves a $20,000 gap that we would find within the operating budget. In the future, we talked about it, and the Chief Hart talked about that they would provide a threat assessment report and get on the remaining buildings and get back to us. And again, we would go over with them a series of meetings and recommendations.
Excuse me, may I? Peter, can you go through that, those puts and takes again? I'm just trying to make sure I follow where
That
the
one?
20,000 ends up from, yeah.
The 20,000 would end up, we would find $20,000
Right,
within the operation budget.
I guess I must have misheard, which is why I'm asking if you can repeat it. We're talking about 170 into Article 10, correct?
Yes.
Then we have 43,000 for the communications, et cetera,
Yep.
things. So,
43,000.
oh, I see. So you're
43,000 would be consumed in the FY13 budget.
So you're reducing Article 6 to also offset the costs of Article 10?
Yes.
Okay, I
For-
wasn't
The
catching that.
43,000 for communications
Yeah,
would be expended in this year.
right.
Article 6, Article 10, which is the building security article, would be amended, our recommendation, to 170.
Right.
We would reduce the equipment from 200 to 100, reduce the benefits from 50 to 0, and then we would find $20,000 within the proposed operating budget, supplies, equipment, whatever.
Okay, great,
And
thank you.
that gets you to 170.
Thank you.
In the future, we talked about the police would complete a threat assessment of all the buildings. If you remember the original plan, there was discussion about redesigning or renovating the lobby areas. they would be put off, but as money comes available, or certainly as Mr. Young alluded a while ago, when we go into a building and we renovate a building, for a particular reason, that would be a priority when we go in the north or south, or whatever school is being renovated. The idea of building security becomes paramount, and it would be added or inputted into the district strategic plan. And that way there, it stays on the plan, and we monitor it, and keep abreast of what's going on. What we're told by Chief Hart and others, that there is a whole new concept undertaking regarding school building security, and some of the procedures may be changed from the aftermath in Connecticut. So if we stay involved with them, we can maybe make changes to our procedures and then push them out to the buildings. Continued training, I think you heard that, is paramount. And last, we would enhance the camera system. That was the other piece that was part of the 475 originally. So I think that addresses some of the concerns regarding the cost of this. I don't think we jeopardize the safety of the students by scaling this back and maybe stretching it over a couple of years.
Okay. Questions? Steve?
You made a statement about the radios, the quote I wrote down was radios direct to police dispatch. I thought that the chief was pretty clear that would not be one of their recommendations, that they would prefer telephone contact of any kind.
But he also then, Steve, mentioned layers. And so what you're right, and that the first response would be via phone, whether it's a landline or cell. But then, so if that doesn't work, then you've got layers, redundancy. The next chance would be a radio, followed by maybe a panic button. So there's three ways that if one fails, you try the next mode of communication to the police dispatch.
Not that I'm against the radios or anything. As a matter of fact, we talked about them 5 or 7 years ago, upgrading our radio equipment at that time. At the same time, we were debating our cell phones for our administrators and that type of thing. So having the radios as a line item, I think is good. How they get utilized, I think, will be determined. We're in a very unfortunate situation here where we're under a time pressure situation because of our budgets to come up with a solution that really does need more research. So if we, say radios, it was clear to me that his comment was that it would just be confusion if they had a radio over there. Thank you.
Nancy?
Well, I'd like to, I think, talk about that a little bit more, because I remember that as well. Because the radio channels got clogged or busy, don't I remember that? And I do remember him saying cell phone would be his preference.
I think it's an issue of professionals knowing how to use it.
Right. So,
Going back to it, and I think Peter's point, it was well taken, and what I walked away from too was the layering concept.
yeah,
And so, if there was, for whatever reason, problem with the cells, or there problem with the landline, we had another avenue which to contact the police. The other advantage of the radios that we're talking about is that it would also allow us to communicate between schools and among schools. So, in a sense, we could have, for the school's point of view, let's say, heaven forbid, we had an issue at the high school. So you've got a call into the police department, let's say, and then simultaneously, we could also contact the other schools directly and say, we've got an issue, whatever that issue is at the high school, we need everybody to go into lockdown or what have you. So I think what it does is it builds in redundancy and flexibility. And going back to some of the other things, I think one of the key things for us is going to be our training coordination with the police department. So what, part of what I took away, and, I heard the same thing you guys did, was that when you have a crisis situation, you need layers. If something fails, you got something else to go back on. And so I think that would be quite helpful for us. And I think that's the reason that we're proposing the radios as a form of redundancy, if you want to call it that, in what would be a crisis situation. So I think it would be helpful.
Do you mind? And you mentioned the threat assessment, and the chief talked briefly about that last week as well, and the last one was done in 2005, so seemingly we're ready for another one. How long does that take?
Well, the word we got from the police department is they're getting right on that. So we should have that by this spring. They did the threat assessments at the high school and the middle school. Many of the recommendations they made, we've already put in place. I would assume, they'll also go, as part of our review with everything, go back on that. And they'll be doing the 3 elementary schools in Moose Hill. So one of the reasons that we backed off somewhat from the lobby issue at this point was to wait and see what we got from the police on their recommendations. And we stayed with, and this is with the concurrence of the police department, was the key fobs, if you want to call it that, and the monitors on the door, so that you've got an enhanced level of security at the buildings. And, keep in mind, we have 260 outside doors. Chuck?
244, I thought the number was.
244. 244 outside doors in the district. And the advantage of the monitoring is, obviously, we've got to keep them open from the inside because of fire issues.
Right.
But what this would do is we'd set, for lack of a better term, a timer, if I understand correctly. So if a door over in the 600 wing at the high school is not supposed to be open, and it's open for more than 10 seconds, 15 seconds, whatever the case, beep, beep, beep goes off, and we know that door is open. It also provides, I think, enhanced security prior to the opening of school. We've got the doors locked. You've got the key cards, which would be coded for specific time periods for people, so teachers could get in early. And then, it also provides that level of security, knowing that nobody's in the building before school starts.
Right.
So that's I think is a plus for us too. So that's why when this package was put together, what we heard was communications was number one, okay, followed very closely by training, and then SROs, and then for lack of a better term, the securing of
They call it
access.
hardening the building.
Hardening the building. Thank you for that
Actually,
term.
what I wrote was communications, training and preparation, access and egress, and
Right.
key fobs
Yep.
were his
you go.
priorities last
Yep.
week. So I'm glad to see that the plan that has come back is less than $500,000, because I'm only one of 5 votes, but I was having some trouble swallowing that. And, I think for me, in terms of putting together a security plan, obviously, as my one vote on this board, I take security in our district very, very seriously. Hard to overlook the fact that there are districts around us that are moving very quickly in security issues. But for me, I'd like to see us, as we move forward, put together our security plan in a thoughtful and well-designed manner. I think that some of this stuff is a good place to start. For myself personally, I would like to see each of our buildings assessed. I don't know if there is any such thing as a school security expert consulting firm that goes in, and I discussed this last week, Al, so it was funny that you should bring that up. I would like our building study, because I would like to see data. I would like to, craft our plan from a point of strength, so that I can look at each one of our buildings and say, okay, these are the areas that we're strong, these are the areas that we need improvement, and craft
Right.
a security plan around that.
And that's really the purpose of the threat assessment by the police department. They do a very intensive, thorough job of
Okay.
that. And, you know, to some of your other points, I think as far as building security is concerned, I think we were ahead of many other schools. 13 years ago, we put in the ID cards for teachers, so,
Yeah,
and faculty and staff, been working on it. And so I think we've been moving in that direction. We had training regarding various safety procedures and the whole bit.
and I'm not suggesting that we haven't been security-minded. It's just
Yeah, oh, yeah.
post-Newtown,
Yeah.
people are voting, you know,
Well,
around
that-
in our region.
That's the purpose for putting it on the strategic plan.
Right,
so it
and
doesn't-
I
doesn't
think
go
that
away.
some of the articles that I've been reading perhaps have been maybe knee-jerk reactions. I can't say that completely because I'm not sitting in other districts, but I'd like our plan to be well thought out and well-designed, and a plan that is ongoing perhaps, and that we can take to deliberative and demonstrate to the taxpayers that we're taking security seriously and certainly being mindful of their wallets. So that's my perspective at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
I think, you know, points well taken, Nancy,
Yep.
and I think what we tried to do with the revised plan was to come back and do that and take immediate, what we consider to be immediate action based on the recommendations that we had.
Right.
Right, and then continue to move forward with the threat assessments so that we can monitor, you know, continue, look at it as a continuous improvement process, I guess,
Right.
is what we're talking about.
Let's never forget that in Newtown, in Columbine, and in virtually every other one of these incidents that I can recall, the outcome was the perps shot themselves. So I'm not too sure what kind of deterrence having faster response from police or teachers with guns or anything like that is going to have. If the outcome that these people are looking for is they're dead too, you know, they're still going to get a chance to shoot up whoever they want to shoot up before they manage to die themselves. The question about radios, I remember it fairly clearly because I was the one who asked about it. I've had a little training in this, in anywhere from the Goffstown Fire Department to Air Force military affiliate radio services. The amount of chaos and confusion that you get on a radio as soon as an incident begins is beyond belief. I'm certain that the captain said that if he had his choice, our people would not be on police radios. I think the idea of getting radios is great. I think the idea of having a school network is sound. I'm strongly in favor of that, but I do not believe that any radios we get should be police band capable. They just should not be able to transmit on that, because the last thing you need is for our broadcast to be covering police tactical information, or worse, for our receivers to be compromising police tactical information. The idea of redundancy is excellent. But again, remember, I think, Al, you're going to like this one. Up in Goffstown, when I was on the fire service, we had something that was called the Marine Corps response. Can you guess what that was? Everything rules. You know, you don't make a phone call, then wait and see if anybody comes, and then hit your panic button and wait. You do them all at the same time. So you use every communication channel that you have simultaneously, in the theory that it increases the odds that one or more will get through. I mean, you pull the fire alarm. You do everything. I'm wondering, I like this revised plan. I think it's spot on. I think that the concept behind it is excellent, and it's what I was hoping that the outcome of tonight would be. The one thing that I'm not clear on is questions like security cameras, key fobs, and door timers, things like that. Just as examples. Where did those suggestions come from?
Excuse me, discussions with police came from discussions when we talked to people in the business of building security.
Okay. So we can point to a expert who we can attribute each one of these ideas to, somebody outside of our own, internal knowledge.
Right, now, on the cameras, I will tell you that everyone we talked to said, as far as the initial incident, the cameras don't do a hill of beans.
Right.
They are more for reactionary and,
Yeah.
and research. They can become useful if this drags on where police would have access to the cameras. But for the most part, the cameras are, so what happened, where did we, where was the weakest chain of the fence, so to speak, and what happened from there?
Now, are you thinking of covering any of these doors on alarms with the cameras?
I don't,
Because that would seem to be a useful thing. If you
Yes.
if you get an alert that a door is open, you have a camera that can tell you why.
right. To be honest, I'd rather not tell everybody where I'm gonna put all my
Yeah,
cameras.
okay. I don't mean to suggest that you should.
We need one in the kitchen, though.
Yeah, really. And roll that tape back. I guess what I'm stressing, what I'm reaching for here is that we have a lot of internal expertise in the district, and I don't mean to denigrate or diminish that at all. But I think that these ideas look to me like a very good set of ideas, but maybe there are more people that we want to talk to and solutions that we want to find once we have the money in hand to make sure we're spending it in the best possible way before we just start drilling holes and mounting cameras. Know what I'm saying? Okay, that's all I needed to say.
John, the cameras are not in any of this money.
Sure.
Talking about.
Yeah, Nate, thank you. You're right. I said cameras, that's future. I'm using it more as an example of,
Oh, okay.
of all the infrastructure that we're looking to wire in and just making sure that, because we say key fobs tonight, if you decide that mag cards is better, that's okay with me. Things like that.
Yes, and that, we are going down that path.
Last time, my first question to you was, what's the tax impact? So I'm going to ask you again, on this particular proposal, what's the tax impact?
If the board goes with our recommendations, the tax impact is $20,000, which would be less than,
No,
from
actually,
what we have
no,
projected.
No, because we're gonna cover the operating budget.
It's going to be a wash, what you have now.
Right. So what we're saying here is this. You take some of the warrant articles that we had and remove, in essence, remove them. The health benefit
Remove money.
be zero.
Yep.
The equipment would go from 200,000 to 100,000.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is based on what we perceive to be the priorities at this point in time, to reorder them. So in pretty much in effect, what you've got is the tax rate impact with all the articles there, pretty much the same as it was laid out with the security article being $1.
Right.
Would that be a fair way of saying it? So if the board agrees with the recommendations, at deliberative session, we would amend those additional warrant articles, those two warrant articles downward, insert the 170.
Right.
And so it pretty much is a wash from what we have now. So I forget exactly what the tax rate is now, but it would not be,
No,
it
there's
would
no
be
additional-
basically what we've got now.
So I understand then the 43,000 is going to come out of our budget
Yes.
from this past year,
This year.
this year, not the going
Right.
forward one. Okay. So we can find 43,000 without,
Well, don't forget, I just gave you the third quarter, which I said that conservatively, we're looking at 704,000 surplus. 400 of that was, remember, the premium holiday that
Yeah.
was not budgeted or we didn't know of. So, thank you, that kind of comes into help for this one-time purpose.
All right, so we feel pretty comfortable then that,
Oh,
that'll be
yeah.
covered. All right, and then some, all right. So, thank you for hearing us, because I was very concerned about that. And my concern last time was that because the tax impact was so high, people would go back and be like, well, wait a minute, let's remove other things, which I was not in favor of. So, thank you for reconsidering, and thank you for putting something out that's palatable, that's structured, to Nancy's point, that really allows us to think through some of these things. I do have two questions on, or one comment regarding some of the radio enhancements, and I'm not necessarily speaking to the how it should be done, that I'll leave to the experts, but I would just ask you to consider, in the event that something transpires where it doesn't happen inside the building, but rather out on, say, the playground, and there are folks out at recess who do have walkie-talkies, and I understand that. You need to arm them, so to speak, with the ability to communicate to those inside the building and elsewhere that there is an emergency.
Right, I
Occurring,
think you
so-
heard from the principals that whenever there's recess,
Yep,
at least one person
yep,
is always carrying a radio, so if something does happen, they radio into the main office of what's going on.
yeah. I just don't want us to forget that it's not just
Absolutely.
inside the buildings. The other thing that I would comment on too is, or I would ask you first is, in all of these things that we're looking to spend any money on, panic buttons and otherwise, and sensors on doors, are all of these systems scalable? I mean, for instance, if right now we're talking about panic buttons, or a few in every building, what if at some point in the future, we want to have panic buttons, let's say, in every room somewhere?
Right. And I think
Will
that
you
gets-
employ a system that
Yes, I think that gets back to
accommodates that?
John's question. We're giving you what we're giving you what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We will work with a expert, consultant, whatever word you want to use, to help us work through what type of system, what type of card system, what type of panic button should we get. And to your point, somebody will say, well, this one is $1 for $1.10, this one is scalable and it'll allow you, then we'll go with the $1.10 one. So
Yeah.
yes, we're giving you what we're being told to do. We'll work with somebody who can walk us through RFPs and pick the best vendor for the best dollar, so forth and so on.
Yeah, because I think, suffice it to say, I'd rather go with
Yep,
something that will see us through several years. And I think that was, yeah, and to Nancy's point about, I understand that the Londonderry Police Department will provide threat assessments for those remaining 4 buildings, but I would, and not to take anything away from them, of course, they're fantastic at what they do, but I would like to have an assessment done, or would like to consider having an assessment done by folks outside just our local police department, to consider
we can do
all
that.
avenues that maybe we just don't see here in New Hampshire, and all, for all the reasons, not just the Newtown incidents and others, but some of the things that we encounter on a weekly and monthly basis here anyway, just so that we can have everything covered. Money well spent. Okay. That's all I have.
So, looking,
But-
no, I'm gonna come around, I'm gonna,
All right, sorry.
if you guys don't mind, I'd like to comment myself, and then I'll get over to you. And then I'll go out to public. So guys, thanks for putting this together. My thought as I hear comments from the board is around, there's 2 ways to look at this. And I look at it from either a strategic or a tactical perspective. And it looks like we've got kind of both covered here, right? From a strategic standpoint, I see enough things going on in the honing down of this document and the proposal to talk about, obviously, immediate things that we discussed the last time we met, and then obviously future things. From a future standpoint, I'm particularly wanted to make note that we're adding this to the strategic plan, which is very, very important, is how we manage our district, and we've managed it for years. One of my concerns was the knee-jerk reaction that was mentioned earlier, where, we had an incident, we're dealing with the incident, people are in panic mode about, making sure things are safe. We go and spend $500,000 because that's roughly what the proposal was the last time, and then everyone forgets about it, and we don't even know what we did. I think by doing this in what I would consider bite-sized chunks, looking at the strategic direction as well as the tactical direction, which is the $170,000 spent, that's how I look at that, I think is a great way to deal with it. From the standpoint of what we're actually doing from a threat assessment, and I'm gonna back this up because I heard things about LPD and so forth. If I take LPD out of the picture and I say, provide a threat assessment report for the remaining buildings, okay? That's really what we're after, right, from what I hear. If it's LPD or conjunction with LPD and a private firm or whoever, I think that's gonna be perfectly fine, right? What we're asking for, and this is a good start, I believe, is that as we move through this, and let's say we do get the funding for this, as we move through this, I'm certain that we're going to now have on our agenda what we're going to be doing from a security standpoint moving forward, as it pertains to the threat assessments, as it pertains to RFPs and what we're gonna be putting in for products, and who's gonna be putting them in. For instance, I heard scalability. I can see issues with, using the internet to communicate and having a centralized network and all those types of things. Way more, way above us, right? What type of key cards and all those types of things. I'm sure we're gonna have many discussions around that, and that's what I see happening with this. Not go spend and we never see from you again, and next thing you know, in 5 years, we gotta put a whole new key card system in because we put something that isn't scalable, right? The communications, which is a big topic, my take on that is very simple. I can clearly see, in the picture that has been painted, something that looks like, an incident happens and all of a sudden, we've got, 60 people on a radio trying to call the police department, right? And nothing's getting through, and the police department's getting overwhelmed with the communications. I don't think that's what was meant.
Right.
I think what was meant was a communication system that is usable in any circumstance that would allow for us to deal with talking to a police department, to a fire department in a particular way, be it through cell phones, be it through radios, be it however, and a policy and a management structure that allows us to communicate internally and then externally. That's how I kind of see that happening. And I go back to having, threat assessment reports and working with the police department to build those things out. So I like this as a first start. I think it's a good way to deal with the first round, as we asked. I don't think we're buying the shiny new Cadillac that was put in front of us the first time. I think we're now grounded in what we want to do. I also like the way that you're trying to fund it, which in my opinion is really was the biggest concern that I had, considering the nature of the economy and the things that are going on in both the school side and the town side as far as what we're asking for from the town people. So I think it's a good proposal. I like what I see here, and I think, quite honestly, if these things start moving forward and we start seeing different projects being put in front of the board as we move through this, it'll be great. Okay? Edison?
Since I speak for the students, I just
Microphone.
ask that,
Yeah, Mike.
sorry. I just ask that we be told what's gonna happen, because just having the doors locked on the outside of the schools is a big shock for us. We're not gonna be able to go in straight to our 8-period class anymore, so anything that's done that's gonna affect us in any way, we just appreciate being told about it. It'd be great.
Comments from the public? Okay, I have Al, and then I have Mr. Douglas, and I'll take Judy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a couple things. I was taking some notes as I've heard, and we were talking about a threat assessments, but we didn't identify a certain school. 4 buildings were identified as saying, well, we'll do threat assessments there. I'm hoping that your threat assessment that you're going to spend on already, that you've already looked at the outer perimeter. When I say the outer perimeter, then work in meaning north-south. Okay, and then worry about the high school that are across the street from the police. So I don't know, nobody, I don't think, knows what buildings where threat assessments were done.
The two buildings where threat assessments were done several years ago were the high school and the middle school. And the police department, in essence, are going to be doing the threat assessments for the remaining 4 schools almost simultaneously. So the idea is that late in the spring, pretty much, those would all be done, so we'd have all the schools.
Point is,
Then
we're
my
doing 4
recommendation-
Because we've already done 2.
Yes.
My recommendation is if you're gonna spend any money, that you identify your farthest point, and hopefully your security force told you this here, your farthest outer perimeter, and then you work in. When I say outer perimeter, north school, south school, which is a big distance from the police department. The high school is across the street. It makes no sense to focus on that, or the middle school, when you have perimeter areas that are far out. That should be a priority, if in fact you're gonna do this.
Right.
That's-
I apologize, Al, maybe I probably wasn't as clear as I should have been. The middle school and the high school have already been done. They were done, I think, high school was in 2005. What we're going to be doing is, in essence, north, south, Matthew Thornton, and Moose Hill.
Okay.
Okay, so, and because 2 schools had been done, they're going to be, obviously, we'll review that stuff and update it, but the idea is to complete the 4 other schools this year, this.
Okay, you answered my question, then, because there was some confusion on what, threat assessments.
I apologize, perhaps I wasn't clear.
In closing, and I'm done, so somebody else can get up here, keep in mind there, there was a comment about what the outcome is. The outcome is somebody is there in the area with a weapon, you stop other lives from being taken. So keep that in mind when you discuss outcomes, because seconds are important when it comes to this stuff here.
You might save a few, not to belittle
Right,
that, but
yes.
you're not going to stop everything.
No, you're not gonna stop everything, but the key is to stop it as soon as you see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn?
Glenn Douglas, 6 Overlook Ave. I get a question on the scalable, because I used to play a little bit in building security when I worked up in North Londonderry, and the building I was in Missouri, we just went through all the building security. There's 250 doors with key card access. Scalable systems make a big difference. Sometimes you can be scalable to 100, and when you go to 101, they tell you, well, you should have checked out the 102 to 200. The other thing is cameras are at the bottom of the list. If a door opens that's not supposed to be opened, I'm not going to ask exactly specifically what the plan is, but if you don't have a camera, you have no idea what's coming in. Is it Jack and Jill sneaking out the back door because they're cutting class for the day? Or is Jack and Bob coming in with a large hockey bag? The cameras seem to be kind of tied to this. And if you can't, and I can't imagine how you could possibly monitor 250 doors with cameras based on, I mean, we only had like 15 entry points in Missouri, and they kept on saying, you guys got to cut this cost down, we can't afford this. And we spent $60 million refitting a building that was already built. I mean, granted, we put in huge machines and a whole lot of other stuff and water systems and all that, but security is very expensive. And when I hear scalable, we checked into it, I'm not hearing that we have a system that's scalable to 300, and that does make a difference. And I don't want to hear next year that we can't tie our panic buttons into our doors, or we can't tie our cameras into the door sensors, because, you know, the way I see this is if a door opens, you need to be able to go to door 25, turn on the camera, rewind the tape, and back up and say, there's nothing. It was just some smart kid that walked by and went, psh, and hey, look, you know, panic buttons are going off. And when I did do security up at North Londonderry, we had 2 back doors that were wired to Londonderry PD. The first day we turned on the system live, I walked out to the back door to get something, and I walked into a Londonderry PD with his gun drawn, telling me to get up against the wall because we have a alarm going off. We end up disconnecting those because people would, even though it said alarm will sound, someone went out the back door to have a smoke, and Londonderry PD was nice enough to come up. They got slower after the first week because we had a lot of problems with that. But
They're not the smoking police.
I was the one that got called at 2 o'clock in the morning, had to walk around checking for the open door, and they walked around with me. But if you don't have cameras, I mean, you gotta, my question is just how scalable is this? And like I said, I know it does make a difference. And honestly, 170 grand, 250 doors at $680 a door, labor, that doesn't really sound like a lot to do 250 doors. I'm surprised we have 250 doors, actually. That seems like a lot. But, I don't know where they all are. So anyway, that was it. And the other thing, this is because a neighbor mentioned this, when you say cell phones, even with a tower over here, cell service in the school system is horrible. I don't know if it's the brick or the stone, but South School, you have to be 2 steps in the hallway here, and if you back up 3 steps, you lose your signal. So phones that are readily accessible, as opposed to cell phones, would be a good idea. And I absolutely agree with the radios, like John said. I used to teach scuba and spent a lot of time in the ocean, and we had guys with way too much money talking on radios on the Coast Guard channel, and when something happened, we heard, hey, we're having parties and cocktails, and we were screaming at them to please get off the channel. We have an emergency. We need to talk to you. Clogging radio channels is a really bad thing. Just listening to the police scanner, I mean, even the guys that do this, you don't know how they hear it. So radios to talk to each other, I think, is a good idea. Radios on the police band is probably not a good idea, but that's it.
Peter?
Just a couple of points. We're not gonna have a card access for all 244 doors. It'd be much, much, much smaller than that. Somewhere in the order of, say, 20, 25 doors will be available to swipe and enter the building. And obviously, the same thing, we're not gonna have, every door isn't gonna have a camera over it. It will have a notification, so if the sensor goes off and says this door is open, it will go back to the custodian's office, who then will go check to see why this door is open. So I might have misunderstood when I mentioned about cameras and doors and so forth. And to Glenn's point about South School, he's correct. We all know that South School has an issue with cell phones. We are in the process of working on that and putting in a booster that will allow the bars, so to speak, to be enhanced at almost all of South School. We're working on that now.
Hi, Judy Sepala, 41 Hall Road. You just brought up a subject that I was going to mention. I don't know what booster you're using. I work for the town of Lexington, and we've been looking at that issue because of the cell phone reception at our DPW. We have a cell tower that's within sight of the building, and there's many Verizon users who have no signal at all. I have T-Mobile, have wonderful service at the DPW. But what they were looking towards was getting a booster in the buildings. The problem is there's no use or system that was available for a large building. It works for a residential because you'd have the booster on your windowsill next to your chair, and you can get a signal because you're within 15 feet of the booster and you initiate the call. If you were in a big building and you had a booster, it works. If you're right by it, you walk away from it, you lose your signal. It doesn't transfer from one booster to another. So if you had multiple boosters, you'd end up having a signal where you're at, you walk away from it, it doesn't transfer to the next one, so you lose your signal. So, I mean, those were issues, and I didn't know if the assessment was going to address cell phone coverage, and a suggestion is that if the town wanted to have a redundant communication system, if you're going to look at maybe distributing some cell phones just for town use in the schools, And you can use some of the mobile apps that they have for like touch to talk. You can have a group list. You can say, I want to have everybody on the group list that needs to be notified. You don't need to know the phone number. You just push the button, say, hey, where are you? We have a problem.
Yep.
You know, that's a solution. I just
Those
wanted
are-
to bring
Those
that
are the things
up.
we're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a free app. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Other comments from the public? Okay, back to the board. So, we have this option presented to us by the administration. I would, yep,
We have basically, for lack of a better word, I don't think I'm revealing a secret here, basically a rundown of who makes which proposals and presentations at the deliberative session.
Yes.
I would suggest that if we are to move in the direction outlined here, we probably want to do the same thing for these proposals.
Absolutely. That, once the board, if the board decides on a recommendation, the script that we'll give you, let's use the equipment article, just for discussion. So you agree with the idea of moving it from 2 to 100. So what we'll do is, the script will say, you know, the moderator reads the article. Motion by, I'm just making this up, John Robinson, second by John LaFerrier. Okay, so now it's on the floor for 200, remember. Then right below it, amendment, John Robinson, I amend the, we'll script it out for you, second by John LaFerrier, that reduces the article to 100,000, so the discussion on the floor is for the 100. So we'll, if you agree with what we're doing, or our recommendation, when we give you the script and give the moderator the script, it will have those amendments all lined up for you.
I, just as 1/5, would be comfortable moving forward with this plan.
yeah, if I can have a motion. we can-
I don't need a motion, I just need I need an agreement, this is what we're doing, so I can script it, so everyone, so the meeting flows a little quicker.
So you don't need a motion for the Article 10?
Correct, because you can't do anything, it's gotta go on as $1.
It's going on as
Well,
$1.
Yeah, what I'd like to do, if possible, is have us vote on, in accepting this,
Sure, on the 170,
on the 170 with the,
43 for this
yeah,
year.
that's
That's
what I'm
fine.
asking for.
That's fine.
So if I can-
accept staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay, motion by John, second by Nancy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes affirmative, 5.
And when we do the script, we'll have it out for you, and to that, we will get that script out to you ASAP. If you're doing a presentation, building security use, for example, you want to call us you want a copy of this, or you want to meet with somebody to go over, and that's what we're here for. So you want to meet with us and go over some of the things, are my points right, are my numbers right? We'll go over with you and make sure everything's today.
Okay.
Move adjourned.
Motion by John, second by, and a second?
I just want to say, too, I want to thank Chuck and Peter. They did the bulk of the work on this, so.
Right.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Gentlemen.
Thank
Thank
all
you.
of
Second.
you for
All right,
coming with that.
motion by John, second by Steve. All in favor, this is a roll call vote?
No, it isn't.
It's not, because we're not going into non-public. Nope, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Run you over.
So you